It is 1943. In Ankara, Turkey, a lavish dinner party is underway. Laughter and cigar smoke fill the rooms of the British embassy. Diplomats and dignitaries trade pleasantries, oblivious to the war, and to the man serving them. But the valet is not just serving champagne. He is waiting for the ambassador to get lost in conversation, waiting for the music to swell, waiting for his moment to slip away from the meal and change the course of the war. In his hands, he will hold the single most valuable secret of the Second World War, the complete, detailed plans for D-Day, Operation Overlord. This is the story of Operation Cicero, the story of a meal that should have handed victory to the Third Reich. But to understand why this incredible intelligence failure happened, you can't just look at the spies. You have to look at the menu, because in Nazi Germany there wasn't one gastronomy. There were two. There was the menu of the Lanzer, the common soldier on the front lines, a diet of starvation, desperation, and a terrifying chemical secret. And then there was the menu of the High Command, a world of lavish banquets, private chefs, and delusional arrogance. One man was fed a one-pot stew called Eintopf just to survive the next hour. The other man was served gourmet delicacies, while his valet stole the war from his safe. This is the story of the two menus that doomed the Third Reich. It's a story of how a nation's diet revealed its fatal flaws, and how the curiosity of a single meal led to the greatest intelligence blunder of the 20th century. To understand the German war machine, you must first understand its fuel. And for the 18 million men who served in the Wehrmacht, that fuel was basic, it was heavy, and it was monotonous. The backbone of the German ration system was bread. Specifically, Kompressbrot, a dense, dark, whole rye bread. It was heavy, sour, and built to last. Soldiers would receive between 300 and 700 grams of this a day, and it was their constant companion. But the hot meal, the one moment of warmth in a day of brutal fighting, was the Eintopf, German for one pot. This was the ultimate field kitchen utility. It was a thick stew of anything and everything the supply chain could find. In the early victorious days of the war, the Eintopf might be rich with pork, sausage, or beef. But as the war machine ground to a halt, especially on the Eastern Front, the meat became whatever was available. Horses drafted to pull artillery were the first to be sacrificed to the pot. The stew became a thin, greasy gruel of root vegetables. And when the vegetables ran out, soldiers boiled tree bark and leather. To supplement this, soldiers carried the iron ration, a can of Schmalzfleisch, a fatty preserved pork, or generic Fleischkonserve and canned meat. And for a quick hot soup they had Erbswurst, a tube of compressed pea and bacon fat powder. You'd dissolve a pellet in hot water for an instant, salty, nourishing soup. Coffee was a distant memory. It was replaced by Ersatzkaffee, a bitter brew made from roasted barley, acorns, or chicory root. It was hot, it was wet, and it was not coffee. This was the diet of the German Lanzer, a diet designed for one thing, mere survival. But as the war demanded more, as it demanded soldiers march for 3 days straight with no sleep, this menu wasn't enough. The High Command needed a miracle, and they found one. In a pill, the Blitzkrieg of 1940, the lightning war that conquered France in 6 weeks, shocked the world. Pundits spoke of a new, motorized, superhuman soldier. And in a way, they were right. That superhuman quality had a name, Pervitin. Today we call it crystal meth. From 1939, the Wehrmacht issued Pervitin tablets by the millions cow. It was marketed by the Temmler Company as a simple stimulant, like coffee, but it was infinitely more powerful. It was the secret ingredient in the German ration pack. Soldiers called it Panzerschokolade, tank chocolate. One pill eradicated fatigue. It induced a state of heightened alertness, euphoria, and aggression. It allowed soldiers to fight for 24, 48, even 72 hours without sleep. Letters from the front are chilling. One soldier, Heinrich Böll, repeatedly wrote home to his parents, begging them to send him more Pervitin. He called it the only thing that helps me stay awake. But the high was followed by a devastating crash. After days of drug-fueled warfare, soldiers would collapse, falling into a zombie-like state. They suffered heart failure, psychosis, and permanent addiction. The German High Command knew this. They saw the reports. But the strategic advantage, the logistical advantage of a soldier who didn't need to eat or sleep, was too tempting. They were, quite literally, consuming their own army from the inside out. This was the first menu of the Third Reich, a starvation diet of Eintopf and ersatz coffee, supplemented by a powerful, destructive amphetamine. It was a diet of pure, brutal, desperate utility. While the Lanzer was chewing on stale rye bread in a frozen foxhole, the Nazi high command was dining, and no one dined like Hermann Göring. Göring's gluttony was legendary. He threw extravagant hunting parties and banquets at his vast estate. He saw food as a projection of power, while Germans at home were under strict rationing. Göring's tables were piled high with delicacies looted from occupied Europe: French champagnes, Danish cheeses, Polish hams, and Russian caviar. This was the gastronomy of the conqueror. It was decadent, arrogant, and completely, willfully disconnected from the reality of the war his own Luftwaffe was fighting. And then there was the Führer. In the center of this world of excess was a man who famously ate almost nothing. Joseph Goebbels' propaganda machine worked tirelessly to craft an image of Hitler as an ascetic, a man above all bodily needs. He was a teetotaler, a non-smoker, and most famously, a strict vegetarian. This was a powerful lie. It was designed to contrast him with the corrupt and decadent leaders of the West, or the gluttonous Göring. It positioned Hitler as a man so purely devoted to Germany, he had sacrificed all personal pleasure. But the truth, as recorded by his personal staff and even his cook, was stranger. Hitler's vegetarianism was a curiosity in itself. It was inconsistent. While he did primarily eat vegetables, soup, and eggs, he was known to indulge in his favorite dish, Leberklöße, liver dumplings. He wasn't a vegetarian for moral reasons. He was a profound hypochondriac, obsessed with his digestion, and he used his vegetarianism as a tool. At dinner parties, he would horrify his guests, who were often generals eating meat, with graphic, detailed descriptions of animal slaughter, just to watch them squirm and put down their forks. So this was the second menu, a grotesque feast of looted luxuries for the inner circle, and a bizarre, curated, propaganda-driven diet for the Führer himself. This was a leadership living in a fantasy, a leadership bloated with arrogance. They believed they were untouchable. They believed their system was perfect. And it was this exact arrogance, this feasting lifestyle, that would make them blind to the greatest spy of the war, a man who was, at that very moment, pouring their wine. We return to Ankara, Turkey. 1943, Ankara was the Casablanca of World War II, a neutral city, and the world's most dangerous hornet's nest of spies. The British ambassador was Sir Hugh Knatchbull Hugeson. He was a classic British aristocrat. He loved his dog, he loved playing the piano, and he loved hosting lavish dinner parties. A creature of comfortable, predictable habits, and in October 1943, he hired a new valet, a man named Ilyesa Bazna. Bazna was an Albanian from Kosovo. He spoke multiple languages, had a knack for anticipating his employer's needs, and was a trained locksmith. Bazna saw the ambassador's habits. He saw the carelessness. He noticed that the ambassador frequently took top-secret documents from the embassy to his private residence to work on them after dinner. He would then place them in his personal safe. Bazna's plan was simple. He offered his services to the German attaché, Ludwig Moisisch, for an astronomical sum. The Germans, skeptical but intrigued, agreed. Bazna's first task, get into the safe. He used the ambassador's gastronomy against him. While Sir Hugh was downstairs hosting one of his many diplomatic dinners, Bazna would slip into his study. He took a wax impression of the key. He had a copy made. The meal was his alibi. The ambassador's love of entertaining was his cover. While Sir Hugh was charming guests, or as he often did, playing the piano for them, Cicero was at work, and the documents he found were beyond the Germans' wildest dreams. He photographed notes from the Tehran conference, details from the Cairo conference, but then he found the jackpot. He found a file stamped with a single ominous word, Overlord. It was the entire Allied plan for the invasion of France. D-Day. Bazna photographed every page. He delivered the film to his German handler. This was it. The war was over. The Germans had the date, the location, and the strategy. They could ambush the invasion and destroy the Allied armies on the beaches. The intelligence raced from Ankara to Berlin. It landed on the desk of the foreign minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop. This single roll of film, this meal served by a valet, should have changed the course of human history. But then, the second menu, the gastronomy of arrogance, took over. The Nazi high command refused to believe it. Why? First, there was infighting. Ribbentrop distrusted his own intelligence agencies. They didn't want to admit that the real prize had been found by a lowly valet, not their master spies. Second, it was simple aristocratic snobbery, the same snobbery that defined their feasting lifestyle. The Germans, and even some British who were also suspicious of the ambassador, couldn't fathom that a servant could be this clever. They assumed he was a British plant, a double agent feeding them false information, and so the Cicero documents, the D-Day plans, were filed away, labeled dubious. The generals continued to plan for an invasion at Pas-de-Calais, exactly where the Allies wanted them to look. The Overlord documents were served to them, and they sent the plate back to the kitchen. On June 6, 1944, the Allies stormed the beaches of Normandy. The Germans were caught completely by surprise. The meal that could have saved them had been wasted. And the final curious twist? The ironic dessert? Elyssa Bazna was paid over 300,000 British pounds for his services. After the war, he tried to use the money to build a hotel. It was only then he discovered the truth. The Germans, in their ultimate act of arrogance and mistrust, had paid him almost entirely in counterfeit money, worthless bills printed in their own concentration camps as part of Operation Bernhard. The spy who stole D-Day died penniless, working as a night watchman in Munich. The ambassador who lost D-Day, Sir Hugh Knatchbull Hugesson, was quietly demoted and retired. Nobody was ever truly held accountable. The story of a nation can be found on its menu. The German Lanzer was fed on Eintopf and Pervitin, a diet of pure function and chemical desperation. He was a cog, consumed by the machine he served. The German High Command was fed on Leberklöße and looted champagne, a diet of arrogance, fantasy, and propaganda. They were so disconnected from the world, so blinded by their own sense of superiority, that when their own valet served them the single most important secret of the war, they were too full to eat. They couldn't believe a mere servant could change their fate. The gastronomy of the Third Reich wasn't just about food. It was a symptom of the disease that rotted the regime from the inside out. It was a curiosity, a meal, that revealed a fatal truth. They were starving their soldiers, while choking on their own pride. The Second World War is full of these hidden stories, where tiny moments had massive consequences. To learn about another incredible story of deception, watch our video on The Ghost Army, the artists who fooled Hitler. And if you want to understand the true cost of the German soldier's diet, watch our deep dive into the Battle of Stalingrad. Subscribe for more hidden tales from history.